Welcome to the County Manager's Report. I'm Lloyd Higuera. With me is Douglas County Manager Steve Mogroheisky. And welcome, Steve.
Hi, Lloyd. How are you?
I'm well. And gosh, we're into August now.
I know.
I mean, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Hello, 2014.
I know. I'm starting to look forward to winter. I was reading a book to my daughter the other night. It had a winter scene, and I thought, oh, maybe the snow will start falling soon. We can go skiing in the mountains, and
it won't be that long.
No, I know. And then winter. Then you get to February, and you can't wait for spring to hit and the snow to melt and longer days. And so it's nice to have the seasons.
We're just never satisfied.
No. But always happy at the same time, right?
That's right.
Always happy to be here in Douglas County, and
absolutely
wonderful activities to participate in our downtime.
And the Douglas County Commission met on August 1st.
They did.
And we're going to talk about that meeting right now.
All right.
Let's start off with commissioners directing the county staff to study the possibility of Douglas County taking over the Sierra Country Estates water system. Oh boy, another water system.
Yeah, this was a challenging issue, and I think there's a long history, of course, to water systems that Douglas County has. Many of which we've acquired from private developments, and we've acquired them at a stage when they're aging and require a lot of capital investment to bring those systems up to a standard. And so Sierra Country Estates is an example of that. In some cases in the past, the county hasn't always required the water system to come up to all the requirements that it needs to. And so the county's acquired the system, and then there have been a lot of costs to the county, or it's other customers have had to take on to make those systems come up to a certain standard. So in this case, I think it's a good example of the county and the board trying to learn from past history in order not to repeat it. And so we had a pretty good discussion. This comes as a result of the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection issued a finding of alleged violation and an administrative order to Sierra Country Estates that they needed to bring their water system into compliance with state requirements. They basically have said, we can't do that. There's a bankruptcy proceeding that the developer went through. The homeowners have requested that the county take the system over, so this came forward to the board. The county has worked in cooperation with the homeowners in Sierra Country Estates over the course of the past year to evaluate their water system and look at different options. And so we presented that to the board, a preliminary analysis, and we shared with them, a number of violations of the water system, issues with their wells, excessive water use, significant amount of water use in the system. The residents are going to be installing water meters in order to quantify where is there a lot of water usage going on and try to get that under control. There's some issues with easements and buffers around the wells. We presented four or five different options available for the county or whoever to bring that system up to the requirements and rectify the violations that are in place. The lowest ranges anywhere from about $700,000 to $1.5 million in investment, capital investment to bring those systems up to standard. Ultimately, what the board decided to do after reviewing all this analysis was to direct county staff, in-house county staff. They didn't want us to hire a consultant. They wanted us to use existing staff and reshuffle some other responsibilities and do what's called a preliminary engineering report, which is a more detailed analysis of the specific costs and schedules and requirements to bring this system up to standard. We'll bring that. It's going to take probably a good year or so to do all that work and bring it back to the board. We likely will have some additional discussions about whether or not the county should acquire this system in the meantime before it's forced on us by a court. So I think we're headed in that path. The board voted 4-1. So they were, the majority said, let's move in this direction. I think there's generally a desire and consensus to move forward and the likelihood that the county will accept this system, but also a desire to see that the customers, the residents of the Sierra Country Estates water system will pay for the required improvements to the system as the county takes it over, if in fact that is the desire of the board at the end of the day.
So how many water systems can the county really afford to absorb? I mean, of course it's incumbent upon you to absorb them if they go bankrupt, right?
Well, it all depends, of course. A court can force the water system on the county, can force the county to be the receiver if the the residents of that water system request that the county be part of it. There's a process to go through. We're always in a better position to voluntarily acquire the system after our own analysis and decisions and collaboration with the affected residents than to have it forced on us. So I think that's certainly the desire here. I don't know that I can give you an answer to how many systems we could manage taking over. There, of course, is the economy of scale issue that, the more systems you acquire and the more customers that you bring on to a consolidated system, in theory, the more you can reduce the overall cost to everyone because you spread that cost around among more and more customers, and you shouldn't need that much more infrastructure in order to service the additional customers. So if you follow the economy of scale theory, more systems is better. That's not always the case, and here's an example of where taking this system on is going to require significant capital investment, but again, the county is saying to the residents in the area, you're going to need to pay for the cost. We're not going to stick that cost on the other customers and the other water systems. That wouldn't be fair. So I think that we're starting from that point, which is not always the point that the county started from when accepting these other water systems in the past. So again, I think that in many regards, this board and the county as a whole is trying to learn from past history so that we don't repeat it. We're trying to make good financial decisions and acknowledge a reality here that you have a failed water system that needs investment, and at the end of the day, the county does have a responsibility to provide for the public health and well-being of our residents, and clean water is a basic right for everybody. And so the county does have an obligation at some level to make sure that all of our residents have access to clean water. So we'll always have a role in that. We just want to make sure that we do it in a way that's fair and equitable and recognizes the history of the challenges with water systems that we've had here. I think we're still coming out of a time when we've largely been a rural community, agricultural-based community throughout history, and as our population grew and development came up, it came up in pockets, and we were not always, prior to 1997, we didn't have a master plan. We're not a planned community from the start. We kind of grew up over many years. You have several GIDs and taxing districts that popped up in towns, so we have a lot of governmental structure here that has been created. We have a lot of different water and sewer providers throughout the community. We have private water systems, GIDs, towns, county, and others that provide all these things. So we're still getting to the place where we can create economies of scale, where we can reduce the duplication of service, we can share services across boundaries. I think it's going to be several years before we ultimately make great progress in coordinating and sharing services with the towns and GIDs on a regional basis to really try to lower the overall cost to our utility customers and to our taxpayers in general. But I think as we start to consolidate more and more of these public utilities, it ultimately is the step in the right direction.
Okay, well, needless to say, there'll be a lot more on this.
This is true.
On this item. Okay. Commissioners heard a report from Fire Chief Todd Carlini on the Bison fire. Now, the last program, we talked quite a bit about the Bison fire. Was there anything new from the chief?
No, the quick overview, 24,000 acres burned, $8.6 million is the approximate. That's a little bit more than we had estimated, about 7.7 last time. 8.6 million, 4 major jurisdictions were involved. Over 1,000 personnel as of mid-July, 18 aircraft, 18,000, nearly 19,000 meals were served. It gives you an idea of the number of personnel involved and the number of days that this fire spanned, 10 days. So it was very interesting, some of the information. I thought the Fire Chief Carlini and Battalion Chief Frazier gave a wonderful presentation where they gave all the data. They walked through day to day, every single day what happened, and then it was sort of like through the 4th of July it happened, and then Saturday, Sunday we started to get the fire more under control, and then Monday, I think it was Sunday, Monday, it just exploded, and the winds picked up and the conditions were such that it just doubled in size within the course of a day. And they showed maps of how, where it started and then how it grew. They superimposed those maps into areas of the county that we can relate to. So like the first 2 days, within the town of Minden and Gardnerville, and then you see how it expands and includes other areas in it, how massive 24,000 acres actually is. It was really incredible. So overall, no lives lost. I think there were around 4 injuries, only one structure, an old mining structure that was burned. So given the size and the cost of the fire, it was not as devastating from a life and property standpoint, but land nonetheless, historical aspects for, for the Washoe tribe, and some things that certainly were losses, and then the cost issue that we participated for the first time in the statewide program. The East Fork Fire District paid $90,000 this year to the state for this insurance pool, and our cost is over $1 million for that. I can't remember the exact cost, but it was over $1 million, and so it was a good move, of course, to participate in that. We'll see how long that insurance pool is going to last and how it changes in future years.
That was a well-spent $90,000, that's for sure.
Yeah, the first year, no doubt. So that's a consistent update from what we've reported in the past, but very comprehensive report by the fire chief.
Okay. Fire chief also brought some other news along with him. Commissioners heard a presentation from him and then approved one-year agreements between Douglas County and the East Fork Professional Firefighters Association and the East Fork Professional Firefighters Association Battalion Chiefs.
Right. These are, as you indicated, one-year contracts. The thing that I should note is that I think, as everyone understands, the East Fork Fire District is a separate district, separate taxing district like the school district or a GID. The Board of Commissioners, the Board of County Commissioners, also serves as the East Fork Fire and Paramedic District Board of Directors. So they review and approve these contracts. So this contract was negotiated by the fire chief and the East Fork District officials, along with those folks. So I just fair disclosure, I didn't have any involvement with these, so I don't have a lot of knowledge of the negotiation process or all the details of the contract, but essentially there were 2 contracts, as you noted, and one-year contracts that were approved with the firefighters and battalion chiefs. For the firefighters, it included a merit increase of up to 5% based on an annual evaluation, increase in incentive pay, change in salary ranges. The total contract was a net increase of about $75,000 in salary and benefits over the current budgeted funds for this current year. And then for the battalion chiefs, again, a one-year contract allows for a merit increase of up to 5% based on that annual evaluation, increase in incentive pay, a change in the salary ranges, increase in the uniform allowance, and a total net increase from the current year budget of about $7,000. So those contracts will take the fire district employees through this current fiscal year, and then they'll be back negotiating here in the not too distant future.
Okay.
And for the county, of course, we've had 3-year contracts
Right.
with our employees, both with the deputies union and the sergeants union, as well as our general employees, and then the non-represented employees like myself who don't work under a contract are all kind of in a 3-year arrangement based mostly around salary reductions, and so we've got this year and next year another 2 years on those contracts, and then we'll be back in negotiations. So this will be the last of labor contracts that we'll talk about probably for the better course of about 1.5 to 2 years from now.
Also, commissioners denied a request from Five Creek LLC for a zoning map amendment to change property on Foothill Road from public facilities to single-family residential. And this was denied on a second reading, which is kind of unusual, of the proposed ordinance. But this is an interesting one because commissioners initially turned it down.
Right.
Then they approved a rehearing of it, and then they approved the introduction of the ordinance,
Right.
but turned it down on the second
That's right.
reading of the ordinance.
You very accurately captured a somewhat complicated process
Yes,
that we've
very
gone through over
complicated.
the course of the past 3 months or so. So I won't repeat that, but that was the process that we've gone through. There was been a lot of debate at the board level and concerns about the change in the land use from public facility to single-family residential, the history of that, and ultimately the board, on a 3-2 vote, denied the request to approve after all of those debates and dialogue and the concerns that have been expressed on the record in the past. in the analysis and information presented by the applicant and the staff, they ended up denying on a 3-2 vote, and they stated individually, the 3 commissioners who voted to deny stated their reason that the application and the request to change the zoning did not meet the findings that are required to be met. You have to meet all 3 findings, and each of them specified the areas in which they felt that at least one finding was not made in order to justify that change in land use. So that concludes that long and drawn-out discussion on that issue for the time being, and we'll see where, if anywhere, it goes from there.
Okay. Commissioners also heard a presentation. This was from the Friends of Danberg Home Ranch on the status of operations there. How are things going at Danberg?
Good. By all appearances, I think the Friends of Danberg Ranch Home Ranch have done a great job. In 2011, as you know, the state funding was cut for that through the state parks system, and the Friends of Danberg Home Ranch stepped up and worked with the county. So Douglas County now has an agreement, a contractual agreement with the Friends of Danberg Home Ranch to assume all the operations of the facility. As part of that agreement, the Friends provide regular updates to the Board of Commissioners on the status of the operations. And so I think, just some basic information. Just over 1,100 people have toured the park since the Friends took over operations. There have been a significant focus on educational and interpretive programs. They've had school tours that include over 418 children, special exhibits and guest speakers. Over more than 3,800 people have visited the park overall between all those tours and general visits and programming and everything that they've done. A big part of this, of course, has been how do they fund it? How do they get the money necessary to make this happen, because the state funds were cut. It's not a county function, but of course we value that historical asset for our community, and our parks and recreation departments have worked with the Friends of Danberg to provide any assistance, funding, assets that we can to make sure that it's maintained and operated in good order, because we see the value, of course, of it. So they work on achieving funding through contributions from over 300 members of the Friends of Danberg Ranch, fees from tours and donations, profits from special events, grants, and other things. And it's great that they have over 40 active volunteers.
Super.
One paid employee, the Friends of Danberg Ranch, and it's one of those, we often talk about this in Douglas County, the commitment of our local residents and the number of volunteers. For the size of our community, we have so many residents who volunteer their time, their resources, their energy, their expertise to so many different things wherever their passion is, and it really has a huge impact on the quality of our community and our ability to provide services and have wonderful amenities that we can all enjoy. So just a great credit and a really good example of the volunteerism in Douglas County.
And Danberg Home Ranch was voted the #1 tourist attraction in the state, right?
They were, yeah. They were, for as I understand, for at least the second year in a row.
Yeah.
And so it's it's a wonderful partnership and a great asset that we've been able to maintain here.
Also at the August 1st meeting, commissioners heard an appeal of the county engineer's decision. This was to maintain current traffic signage at Glenwood and Riverview Drive.
Right.
Has that been a problem intersection? Or?
There's a concern from a resident in particular who was concerned about the opening of the Walmart at Grant Avenue, and that the Walmart would increase traffic on Glenwood and Riverview. And so we went through the resident requested a stop sign and some traffic signal improvements at that intersection. Our county engineer very diligently worked with the resident on that issue, responded, we did a traffic study, which is typically what we do anytime we look at speeds on county roads or traffic signage improvements. We always go out and do an analysis, we don't want to just put signs up everywhere and change speed limits based on individual preference. It should have some engineering and public safety justification to it. So we did that study and determined that it does not meet the scenarios required by the standards that have been established nationally for any type of traffic safety signage improvement there. But we always, as we talk about at the staff level, we're a solutions-oriented county government. So if we can't address the problem in the requested way, we always look to see, is there something else we can do to try and find a solution that's reasonable and that meets the needs of the requesting party and is in the general best interest and common good of our residents and our community. So in this case, the county engineer recommended and the board approved two actions. One was to look at requesting one of the residences in the area to trim their trees to allow for the landscaping to be cut back and the sight lines to be improved so that traffic would have a better idea of looking at the intersection, see who's coming and having safer traffic movements. The other was to put a reflective mirror at that location so that traffic coming out of that intersection would be able to see oncoming traffic and they'd be able to anticipate it in a way that they can't currently because of the sight lines at that location. So two things that I think the resident was appreciative of those efforts and the board felt like they were appropriate given the circumstances. Very low cost items. I think the cost of the reflective mirror is a few $100s. So as compared to the other costs for the traffic safety improvements. So hopefully that's a reasonable solution to achieve some of the concerns that were addressed there without making the improvements that we felt didn't have a justification based on the engineering studies.
Okay. Commissioners also approved a resolution authorizing a temporary one-year interfund loan in the amount of $1.5 million. This was for the regional water fund.
Right.
This isn't the first time they've done this. This is
No, we do the general fund. We have a general fund interfund loan program where we have reserves available in the general fund, which is a responsible, conservative financial practice to have reserves available. And a lot of what we use those reserves for in the general fund is to loan to other funds for cash flow purposes, because you may be doing a project and there's money to pay for that project, but whether it's a grant fund or a bond or some other revenue source, you haven't collected all of it. You know you're going to get it, but you haven't collected all of it. So we loan money from the general fund for cash flow purposes to allow the project to get up and running and proceed. And then as the revenue comes into that fund, we repay the general fund back what it's owed. And as you indicated, we've done this several times with this project in particular, and the money is always paid back to the general fund. And so that's what happened here.
Okay. Another item approved was a land division application for a residential tentative subdivision map. This was for Edgewood companies to divide 89.64 acres into 17 parcels located south of Buckeye Road and the Mid-Valley Boulevard intersection.
Right, and there was not a lot of discussion on this issue. I think the board understood what the request was based on to, as you indicated, it's a tentative subdivision map to divide 89 acres actually into 16 parcels, 16 parcels and one private roadway, common area parcel. So there are 17, but there are 16 private and then common roadway and general area parcel. It's in the RA5 zoning district. It seeks to reduce private road right-of-way from 60 feet to 50 feet. That was one of the variances that was requested, to allow a modified rural road section and requests for a private road, private access road on the interior of the development. So some I think relatively minor variation requests, and the board unanimously approved that.
Okay, this next one sounds complicated, but I'm sure you'll explain it very clearly. Commissioners approved a request for an abandonment of two separate 10-foot easements on two adjacent parcels, which together create a 20-foot pedestrian and equestrian access easement in the Indian Hills Jacks Valley planning area.
This is, boy, I don't know. I'll do my best. This was an example, I think, of a fairly complicated issue. A lot of history to it, some really interesting public policy questions, and I thought of a really thoughtful public debate. So it was one of those, if you happen to be at the meeting late, we went till about 8:30, 9 o'clock that night. It was a late meeting. There was a lot of debate and dialogue on this issue, but I thought it was, if you enjoy the art of public debate and dialogue, this was up there among them. And the issue really was, there was a development agreement that was in place many years ago. It provided for an easement, a public access pedestrian and equestrian easement of 20 feet that acts to allow access into Forest Service BLM land for hiking and equestrian purposes. What happened was there was a driveway that was constructed partially over the easement, over a portion of the easement, and then the current property owner, when they purchased the property, put up a fence along the easement, along the driveway and the easement, to not allow the public onto their private driveway, which seems reasonable, of course, because it's a private driveway and they just wanted to maintain their private property from what the public easement had allowed, and they were seeing a lot of public that were coming onto their private property. There also was a concern from the resident who felt unsafe at times, given their own personal situation. And so the request was but what had happened is the fence was then constructed on an additional portion of the easement. And so the public policy question was, do you allow for the public taking or the private taking of this public easement that was granted, or do you force the private property owner to remove the fence and rectify the issue? So this long debate ensued with many of the residents, and the residents in the area largely supported the request from those two residents who had put the fence up, and they said, you know what, we have adequate access, the public has adequate access, there's no harm being done. Two residents that got up and opposed that and said, no, they said 20 feet, that's what it shouldn't be 15 feet. So ultimately, the long story short is the board ended up approving the request to allow the 15-foot easement as opposed to what was originally agreed to, the 20-foot easement, finding that there was no public harm that was done by the loss of that 5 feet. And in fact, there were improvements to the easement above and beyond what was originally required to allow for better public access. So complicated issue, really interesting policy question. I thought a good debate and a reasonable decision by the board at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, we're kind of running out of time. We got a couple more items that I think we can do quickly. One was commissioners introducing an ordinance relating to garbage and trash collection for the town of Gardnerville.
This was a cleanup. There was no restriction on the number of trash cans in the town of Gardnerville. So the town does, as you sit on the town board, Lloyd, and the town does trash collections, and you had some instances where people had 3, 4, 5 trash cans on one parcel. They had several people living on the parcel, and it just became a cost and operational issue. So it restricts it to 2 cans, is my understanding, per parcel, right? So this was a cleanup of the code and providing some reasonable restriction for the number of cans that you can have. Any cans in addition to 2, the residents would have to pay additionally for.
Correct. Okay. Last item on the agenda was commissioners approving the sale of county-owned property, a building at Minden Tahoe Airport for $250,000.
Right. This was a building that we acquired, a hangar that had been partially constructed, not fully improved in the inside, partially constructed. We acquired through a bankruptcy proceeding. And so this is a good story, in my opinion. We were able to collect $250,000. Back taxes were paid to the taxing entities that owed taxes from the property. $70,000 plus was paid to the airport for back lease payments that were never paid. The balance went into the airport fund to be able to pay for future improvements at the airport, particularly east side improvements and reserves. So, and then you have a really reputable, outstanding tenant who's coming in, going to make additional investment to bring that building up to code and standard, occupy it, and operate a business out of there. So just a really great, I think, win-win story there of economic vitality and repayment to taxpayers.
Do you have anything for the August 15th meeting? Have you put it?
A couple items. We'll have an update from Carson City Health and Human Services on our partnership with them. We will have an energy audit at the state level that they're doing for rural communities. A number of items, 3 items that we'll talk about lake water system. So we're talking again about water at Lake Tahoe. Capital investments that need to be made, funding options for that, and then rates that need to be set for Lake Tahoe customers.
Okay. Well, Steve, I want to thank you for all the information you've imparted on us here on the County Manager's Report. That's what we do here. And for Steve Mokrohiski, I'm Lloyd Higuera, and we'll see you next time on the County Manager's Report.